So in this tutorial, we're going to again investigate waves by painting the not waves. But what we need to do is get a decent background down. So we will need a canvas this size, and we'll need a brush about that size. And you'll need a brush later on to flick some shell grit and stuff on the surface. This one will probably be fine, but if you have concerns about controlling it, maybe a little bit smaller. Hi, I'm Mark Waller. I'm all about going out into the world, finding beautiful things, painting them, and sharing that process with you. These are our colours. We're going to use the Atelier Interactive White, Pthalo Blue, French Ultramarine Blue, but we could use the interactive with that as well, not necessarily free flow. Cadmium Yellow Medium, Dioxazine Purple, Burnt Umber, and we've just got Alizarine there just in case we need it. So I'm going to start this process off with some Cad Yellow Medium, some Dioxazine Purple, and a pile of white. Now that's looking a little bit purpley to me, so I'm just going to put a bit more yellow in it. And that should get me out of trouble. This is our sand colour, and I'm actually going to start at the bottom and work my way down. So the canvas is upside down here, if that makes it easier. So there's my sand colour. I'm just going to come down a couple of inches. Just push that paint up into the corner, and you can just drag that off really lightly with a light brush. It sort of cleans it up a bit. Okay. So now I'm going to get some more white and some French Ultramarine Blue. And blend those colours together like that. Some more white and more French Ultramarine Blue. I'm just going to add a tiny bit of yellow to that, and I'll explain that all in a second. So we're adding the blue to create the impression of the sky being reflected on the surface. But I want a little bit of that yellow in there because it's still sand colour. I want to create the impression of there being water, and it's gradually getting a little bit deeper. So now I'm going to repeat that process again. So I've added a little bit more blue and a little bit more yellow to that. I've got that nice shallow water blue greeny colour. Just blending that up nicely. I want a nice subtle gradation like that. And again. So now just a bit more French Ultramarine Blue. A bit more Cadmium Yellow Medium. And one more strip across there, like that. So this is a combination of the watercolour, the sand colour and the sky colour, but because it's been quite shallow up until now, there's not been a lot of watercolour. So now we're going to add our watercolour. So I've just added a bit of Pthalo Blue to that. And I'm going to add a bit more Cadmium Yellow Medium because it's still very shallow, and a little bit of white because that's a bit too strong. We don't want the water to be too deep. So we need that nice kind of dirty lime green colour. And now we just do the last band like that. Pushing the paint into all of the little cavities and the weave in the canvas. And don't forget to do that cross hatch kind of thing. That's a nice way of getting that really nice gradation. Okay, I'm just going to flip that up. have a look at it. I think we're good to go. So I don't like waste, so I'm going to keep using this, but I'm adding a little bit of burnt umber to that because I want to create a nice little sand fleck in there, probably a bit more like that. And I'm going to wet that down because I want the paint to be quite runny, like that. And now, always test it somewhere first. Okay, and I'm getting a lot of the big splats off there. So I'm grabbing a little bit of Dioxazine Purple now because I want that to be quite a bit darker. And I'm going to add a bit more cadmium yellow medium to that. Like that. So you'll notice that I'm doing a lot of this in this bottom area because as the water goes out, there'll be more sky reflected and you won't see so much of the gritty, sandy stuff under the water. Okay, I'm using a smaller brush now because I want stronger pigment and I was losing a lot of pigment in that paintbrush, and I want a more delicate and fine splatter. You need the paint quite runny for this. Okay, and that's quite dark as you can see, and hopefully that will be a smaller speckle. That's much better. And you'll notice that I'm kind of doing a bit like a whip, like, and that's how you get that. Those nice little spots everywhere, reasonably even. Now we're going to repeat this process quite a lot of times. So now I'm just going to add a bit of French Ultramarine Blue because, you know, all of these little bits of shell have lots of different colours in. They've got those lovely sea browns and blues. So, you know, I'm not too fussed about, you know, exactly the right colour here. I've grabbed a little bit of Alizarine and I'm putting that there and that there and a little bit of burnt umber just to brown it up a little bit, and we'll go again. So I've just cleaned my brush and I'm getting a bit of white now. I want a paler colour. So I can get a little bit of that cadmium yellow medium, a tinsy bit of Dioxazine Purple. And we don't have to worry about the colours being exactly right. If that's a little bit too purple, that's all right. I'll add yellow to it next time around. We're gradually building things up. And you'll notice I'm starting at the bottom of the canvas and working my way back up. I want a gradation of these specks as well. More white and more yellow. Getting pretty close. I reckon we can add some burnt umber to that. Got to have some poo brown shells.
Great sound.
Whoop, whoop, whoop. Okay, some white and a bit more of that yellow there. I feel like it needs a paler colour now. And again, just a touch more water to make it mobile. And remembering, of course, that I'm washing my brush out in between the darker and lighter colours. Pretty close. Get nice, neat burnt umber there now. Burnt umber is such a good colour, it kind of warms everything up, and it's nice and dark but still warm and earthy. So what we're going to do with this exercise here is we're going to look at painting waves in a slightly different way. We've done something similar to this before, and it's about painting the not waves. So what we're going to do is look at the parts that aren't the waves and create the illusion of the surface of the water, and that will then give us waves. So what I'm going to do now is get some chalk and mark in roughly where I want the surface of the water to be. I've just got an old piece of scrap canvas here to play around on. Let's see what happens. Chalk's fantastic. I can put in a suggestion of a little wave there. I can mark in the surface or the back of a wave out here and another one here. And you can actually do this with blue chalk and create the impression of the light reflecting on the surface of the water. Now I know where everything is. So I'm just grabbing a little bit of white here and some French ultramarine blue. And that is going to be a reflection of the sky on the surface of the water. And that's going to help us create our waves. So I'm going to make this line across here first because that's the sharpest wave. And so if there's a little bit too much paint on the brush, I can get away with using that there. As it turned out, it's just the right amount. And I've got a wave out here. That's the back of that wave out there. Like that, and now I'll just fill in the blanks. Okay, so now all I'm doing here is just creating the impression of the light hitting all the little ripples. And you'll notice that when I reflect the sky like this, it flattens the water. And where I leave a gap, like there for example, where the wave is, it creates a wave. So I'm going to come down here now, let that dry so I don't drag my fingers through it. I'm doing this quite flat, and it creates the impression that it's not very windy, it's not very choppy. Okay, so I can't go any further up here now, so I'll go back up here. And hopefully this is all dry enough, seems to be. So I've got my finger resting on the surface of the canvas, so that I can control the amount of pressure I'm applying a little easier. And that's why I'm waiting for these bits to dry so that I don't smudge them. And as the amount of paint diminishes in the brush, I move up into the canvas where it's less important to get a stronger mark. And now we're coming up to the first wave. And this area down here in front of the wave tends to get a little bit flat because the wave pulls the water towards it. So I'm okay for it not to have too many lines in it. So we should be starting to see a couple of little waves form here. So I'm just going to re-establish all that a little bit more. Stronger on the back of that wave. Stronger there. Now there's a little wave here, there's a little ripple running off there. I'm just, oops, ignore that bit. Just going to run the brush off like that to create the impression of there'll be a little wave there. I might make another one go that way, just because I can. And I might just finish off that part up there. Again, starting on the back of the wave where the colour's most likely to be the strongest, till I'm happy with the amount of paint on the brush, and then move up. Okay, now while I've got that colour on the brush, I'm going to suggest that there's a reflection on all of these little shells and things here, but I want to create the illusion of it receding off into the distance. I'm just going to drag those lines down like that, so it looks as though the water's receding back out and the little ripples are pointing towards the horizon. Just grabbing a little bit of Pthalo Blue, a little bit of Cad Yellow Medium. Sorry, that's Cadmium Yellow Light, not Medium. And I've got that nice blue-green colour. And now, just under that bit at the top there, and we only need it to be subtle, I'm just going to do that, and that will give the wave its thickness. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Like that. It doesn't hurt here and there just to do a couple of little lines like that. And it's always a process. If you overdo one thing, you can come back and paint over it again. And a couple more just little ones down here. One there. One there. This is, while slightly different, is actually just the fundamentals of painting waves. So I'm going to get just the tiniest bit of Pthalo Blue. and the tiniest bit of cad yellow light and some white. As my basis. No, that should be right. But now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add some cad yellow medium to that as well, because I want to warm it up and limify it slightly. So right about here in the face of the wave, I'm just going to put that lovely lime green, because what that does is it creates the impression of the reflection, or being able to see through the face of the wave, the sand underneath. And that's kind of a dirty colour underneath. That's why I added the cadmium yellow medium. Say that 6 times swiftly. Okay, I'm going to repeat that process, just add a bit more cad yellow medium and some white. Lolly. This is a strong colour, so I'm just going to put a tiny bit down first to see if it works. Close. A couple of bits pieces here and there. And where that wave is there. So what I'm going to do now is get neat burnt umber. I'm really going to thin it out. And I'm actually going to change brushes, because I want a brush that makes a broader mark than that. So this thin burnt umber now is going to represent the shadow that a wave makes on the sand. Paint off, and I'm going to do another line here just in front of that little wave, and another one there. While I've got that colour, I'm actually going to get a bigger brush, and I'm going to accentuate that water running back, being pulled back by the waves out to sea. That little bit of burnt umber warms up that foreground, pulls it towards you a little bit. So I'm grabbing a reasonable blob of white, and I'm going to add it to that lime greeny colour, and a little bit more cadmium yellow medium, like that, maybe a bit more white. Okay. Now, this part's super fun. When the light hits the surface of the water, it refracts and creates this beautiful pattern on the sand, on the shells and the rocks and everything that's underneath. I will leave that there because later. And so that's what I'm doing here, creating that impression, rolling the brush backwards and forwards, sort of creating sort of loose diamond shapes. Like that. And of course out there. So when you get the impression that it's bright sunlight, and this is a really simple way of creating that impression. And if we didn't want it to be bright sunlight, we would do less of this. And out there, of course. You don't have to be super exact with these colours either, because the next sort of stage, or the surface of the water or whatever, will kind of even it all out. Okay. Now this wave, I've made that shadow a little too strong. I don't want it to look as though it's breaking, so I'm just going to soften that up, get that through there. And then in a minute I'll show you another trick to fix that. But now, this one I want to be about to break. So I'm going to make that quite sharp through there. Like that. I want that, this brush is splaying out a little bit, but I actually want to concentrate that along the bottom of that wave, like that. It's not behaving. And very narrow line in the face of that little wave. And there. And that's drying back. So you can see those refractions disappearing as they dry back a little bit. So I'll repeat that process again with a little bit more white and a bit more cad yellow medium. It's got a lot of colour on my brush now, so I'm just going to do that one there with the waves strongest, and I'm just breaking it up just to create the impression of the refraction disappearing off out into the deeper water. Oops, I may as well do these little guys as well. And back to the refraction. I'm probably not going to do a lot in that wave up there because I don't want it to be too steep. The more sharper I make that refraction line, the steeper the wave is. As a general rule, the sharper the lines are in a wave, the steeper it is, generally. So now I'm mixing some more white and French ultramarine blue together, that original sky reflected on the surface of the watercolour, because when I put those refractions on there, the sky reflections disappeared. So now I'm going to re-establish them. And remember I said before that I'd made this wave a little bit steep. As I go into in the wave fundamentals tutorial, you can soften a wave or make it less steep by reflecting the sky. So by bringing those reflections up there like that, it makes the wave less steep and more gentle and in deeper water. So you're telling a whole story just by moving a few lines around. And this one is steeper, so I'm making those lines sharp. And you can sort of start to suggest little waves and ripples between the waves here and there by just being a little bit selective about where you put these highlights and not necessarily making them everywhere, just leaving little gaps here and there to create the impression of little swells between the waves. And then it looks more natural and we can avoid our compulsion to pattern make while still making a pattern. I really enjoy doing these little waves down here because that gives you a lot of bang for your buck when you put those highlights on like that. Really kind of creates the impression of these little wavelets. Now that top bit up there needs a bit more because it's flatter relative to your eye, so it's going to reflect more sky. There's a little wave there, I'll start there. I reckon there's going to be another one there. So this combination will be very complicated. It's just white. And now I'm just going to, in my white like that, bring that to there. I've joined that one up to that little wave there. And now I want some swirls that sort of change direction a little bit, just to kind of give the impression of that wave, of that suds and the water moving around a lot on the shore, following all the little holes in the sand. If you watch these little eddies and things long enough and you watch the shapes they make, you'll see water being pulled out to sea and being pushed in and stirred up. But then if you look for long enough, you'll see little bits of shell grit and, I'm guessing, small animals, small little crabby things and stuff all being washed out. And then somewhere out there you'll find a little patch of fish just sitting out there waiting. And then probably further out there'd be some bigger fish. It's amazing what you see when you sit still for a bit. Kind of nice to kick those little bits of suds like that up over the top of a wave. Oops, overdid that one. Shh, never happened. Good tip to keep your brush parallel with the bottom of the canvas. And I'm just using the corner of the brush here now. So what I mean when I say using the brush flat relative to the bottom of the canvas, it means that the brush stays flat and creates a plane, kind of adds to that illusion of dimension. If you hold your brush at an angle and start doing them that way, it looks very weird very quickly. But by holding your brush largely flat, it looks much more natural. It's just science. So now these waves up here, I'm going to make these little waves about to break like that. And you'll notice I'm letting the brush, as I do this, the brush is kind of splitting and pulling apart. I'm all right with that. And now just with the edge, create the impression of some whitewash bouncing up. We'll come back and put some shadows in there later. Like that. And now we'll take most of the paint off that brush, come back down here, and I'm just going to brush in a little reflection under that whitewash. It's very subtle at the moment. We'll build it up a bit later on. I personally prefer to err in the favour of a bit too subtle first and then come back later and build it up. Okay, and now I'm going to add some water to that. And with reflections I tend to do dry brush down and wet brush across, so I'll start at the base of the wave there. And as I come further down, you'll notice that the gaps between the reflections become bigger. So I've got quite a few concentrated ones there, and now when I get down here, they're a bit further apart. And same on the other side. And you'll be surprised at how strong those reflections are and what you can get away with there. So I'm grabbing a little bit of Pthalo Blue and some burnt umber and mixing those two together. And I'm going to lean into the burnt umber a little bit more than the Pthalo Blue. Get some white just to see how much. So you can see how strong that Pthalo Blue is. It's way too strong. More burnt umber, and I'm leaning more into the burnt umber because the background is kind of a grayer colour and it's only shallow. So I'm going to, with this colour, paint the shadows in the whitewash. What's that you say? Whitewash is white? No, it's not. So I'm just going to, oops, took too much paint off. Do that. And that. And now I'm going to mix this colour up, but I'm going to add a little bit of Dioxazine Purple to it because I want this shadow to be quite sharp. We're only going to use the corner of the brush. I'm just going to come in under there and selectively here and there now that's a little bit too strong probably, but we'll see. And by doing this here and there on the wave with that shadow, it creates those lovely little lumps and bumps in those little ripples as they work their way to the beach. I might just squeeze a bit of that in there too. I'm going to now get a pile of white, like that, add it to that colour, and add a big blob of French ultramarine blue to it. So I want a nice kind of bluey grey kind of colour. And I'm just going to work into that shadow area like that. And this creates the illusion of volume in the whitewash. There'll be areas that are in shadow and areas that are in highlight. And now I'm going to soften the edge a little bit of that there. One of the interesting things about whitewash is just when you closely look, just how many little subtle shades of blues and greys and all sorts of colours in there. Just going to grab this colour here, again, put it there, get a big blob of white. And repeat the process. I want to give a lovely transition of sort of white through to the shadow colour as that wave breaks. Not worry about it too much in this one because it's such a small little bit of whitewash. Okay. Whoops. Expensive paintbrushes. Okay. Yeah. All right. So now it's neat white. And I'll probably have to redo this a few times because, well, firstly that paint's still wet, but also because the white does tend to dry back a little bit. There's a couple of little things we can do before that. And I'm going to go back to my other flat brush. So now I'm just going to just establish that little bit of lip there. I want the wind just to be blowing into the face of it a little bit. And we can tell an entirely different story about the day just by how we approach the way the lip interacts with the rest of the wave. Now while I've got that white, just establish these parts close to the front of the wave. As whitewash goes towards the beach, it gradually loses air. And the little bubbles are what gives it the appearance of white, of being white. So as the bubbles diminish, the intensity of that whitewash also diminishes. So we make the whitewash quite strong at the front edge like that, but let it dissipate further back into the picture. Okay, while I've got that white there, now, these little ripples that are running back that way are going to affect the reflections in the whitewash a little bit. So we're going to suggest that. So this is our reflection of those little waves right on the sand. Make it right up close to the shadows too, because then it makes the waves look smaller. Doesn't hurt to throw a smaller little reflection in here and there too, just to give it a little more texture. And those waves up there would also be reflected down there on the wet sand. Do that. Okay, so I'm going to get my sky colour, add a tiny little bit of white to that. And come back on the back of this wave like that. We need a bit more paint. And now I'm going to reflect the sky and suggest the wave kind of rolling over and the reflection down the face of the wave. Or the outside of the wave. It's not actually the face, is it? So I'm getting some more neat white. I'm just going to use the edge of my brush and just suggest a little bit of spray coming off the back of this wave. The wind's just picking up that lip as it goes over. And if you do this really strongly, it creates the impression that it's a windy day. If you do it subtly, obviously much less. You'll notice I'm pushing the brush back up against itself sometimes. What that does is it sort of squashes the bristles on top of one another, and it makes these really nice broken kind of looks, marks. So it looks a little bit like little kind of conglomerations of water bubbles in the air. Just re-establish that whitewash. And while we've got the white, let's bump that up a bit more. I always love doing this bit. Instant reflection, instant shiny water. And there we are. We were wondering what to do with this little exercise, and so we've decided what we'll do is we'll get you to do a painting of it, and then when you're happy, you post it on your Instagram page. We'll go through and pick one out at random and send it to you. Remember to tag us though. While this picture is predominantly about some waves, we've actually focused our attention on the bits that aren't waves. So we've been painting the not waves. Sometimes it's useful to maybe focus on a different part. There's a little bit more of that coming up. Very, very similar process, but at night, and it's possibly even more clear then.